Well, today's guest is one of my favorite, and based on your feedback from our first interview, your favorite too. Dr. Sandra Kaufman is the coolest person, and coolest expert and person on anti-aging, and someone who just gets us women who are over 50 because she is one of us and she doesn't accept ageist stereotypes, and she's carving out her own path to aging. And she literally wrote the book on it called The Kaufman Protocol: Why We Age and How to Stop It. And in that book, she gave such an easy to follow, it was totally informative, and it was really entertaining too, to look at the aging process. And then she explained the protocol that she came up with using molecular agents or supplements to slow down this process. And now she's got a new book coming out called The Kaufman Protocol: Aging Solutions, where she covers 28 brand new agents that you probably have never heard of before. And she shows us how to use them in your aging protocol to reverse and slow aging. So Dr. Kaufman started her career originally in the field of cellular biology, and she got her master's degree from the University of Connecticut in tropical ecology and plant physiology. And then she turned to medicine, and she got a medical degree at the University of Maryland. And for the last 6 years, she's been the chief of pediatric anesthesia at the Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital in Florida. And everyone in the biohacking world already knows Dr. Kaufman. And outside of this world, she's also been recognized as best in medicine by the American Health Council. So we're not the only ones. And I first heard about Dr. Kaufman on the Ben Greenfield podcast, and I was just so blown away by what I heard, I had to reach out to her. So I sent her an email. And fortunately, much to my surprise, she replied. And she's been incredibly generous with her time. And I'm going to talk about her books today. I love her book. She's got an app as well. We'll mention, talk about that as well, which I think everyone needs to download and use all of these as a reference. I use them with my clients. I share them with my community. I just love Dr. Kaufman and all that she puts out for us. So without further ado, welcome, Dr. Kaufman. How are you?
Thank you. So nice to be here with you again. I've looked forward to this for a while.
Me too. Actually, right when we finished the last one, which is only, I think, about a year ago, I was already waiting. I was like, we got to do a part 2. And luckily you wrote a book, so that we do have another topic, but we could probably talk about so many other things. But in case anyone hasn't heard that first podcast, I'd like you to briefly share how you even got into this world of aging, and because your path is as an anesthesiologist, right?
Yeah, so I am an anesthesiologist, and I don't know if anyone's watching, but I'm wearing scrubs and I'm sitting in my office at a children's hospital. So yes, I'm a practicing physician. But I was also a cell biologist before I went into medicine, and I'm absolutely obsessed about how our cells age and then what we can use on a pharmacological basis to sort of defer cellular deterioration, which basically is what can we do not to age. So my perspective is cellular, which of course then leads to organ failure and blah, 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 and overall failure over time. But if we can stop it at its most sort of simple, basic reasons, then we win. So that's what my goal and path are.
Yeah, so it really started as your own personal journey. And if I remember correctly, it was like your friends going, okay, what are you doing? Because it's obviously working, and you still got plenty of energy, you look awesome. And now it just kind of, you said, well, I'm just, instead of going one by one, you created this awesome book and this awesome app so people can personalize their protocol, right?
That is sort of correct. So the answer is the app at the moment is just dysfunctional. So you can stop talking about the app. It will get fixed. At the moment, it's not working, but over time it'll be fine.
It's so good though. I loved it.
It's extremely frustrating. I clearly hired the wrong developers. We will fix it, and it will be back. I promise you. But people would be frustrated right now because that's just what happens. But yes, to go back to my own journey, I am a rock climber. I'm an avid rock climber. And in my 40s, I was hanging off a cliff, and I was thinking that, this is a bit dangerous. And unless I do something to curtail my aging, It's not something I'm going to be able to do over the years. So that's when I decided to sort of figure this out. And it was absolutely a selfish journey. I sat there trying to figure it out bit by bit by bit. And you're absolutely right. It was things that I would do for myself. I had no impression that the rest of the world would want to know, but apparently they do. So I started getting asked, and I started, telling people what I did, which led to book one, which led to more podcasts, which then led to me writing book two. And the journey continues.
Yeah. So what people can do. So we're going to talk about your book too. And the book one also, you explain plants, supplements, molecular agents. You explain them so comprehensively. So it's really, this new book is really like a reference guide and like something that I have to have on my bookshelf that I can go back to when I need it, take a deeper dive in what is this, agent, this supplement, whatever, and I can pull it out. And, there's so many cool stuff there that I think it's a must read for, especially for supplement junkies like me, like and Magdalena here. We love to experiment with supplements. I mean, we're biohackers, so we just enjoy testing and retesting and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And you have done a ton of research. You've got 40 pages of references. So what you're sharing is really evidence-based, because I don't do that kind of research. So I really trust that you've been through all of this. And I love in the book too, you give a history behind each plant, or, where does this come from? And it's not just something that's just made in a lab or something. Originally it had some history. And I think makes it really entertaining. And I love the fantastic system that you made of just, you can focus on one body system, which you explain, the gut. How does the gut work? What's going on? And it's wonderful. So we get an idea, not just this is a great supplement for the gut, the brain, the skin, whatever. And then we can refer to that system and see what are the best things for, say, example, our skin, right? I get that question all the time. What's good? What should I do for my skin? And everybody wants to just pop a pill or slap something on their face. And so these are awesome, the way you've categorized this. And honestly, this book has just the right amount of science, I think, to satisfy the doctor or the biohacker, but not so overwhelming that you lose the layperson. So you really just, you enjoy, at least I enjoy reading the humorous parts, because you have your sense of humor blended in there, because otherwise, could be really overwhelming for some people. But it helps me learn and it helps me stay engaged. And so I really love that. And for me personally, one of the most important parts, and that I really loved, is to see how you weave certain supplements into your daily protocol. What are you taking? And you've done all this research, so people want to know that, and you are just completely transparent about that. You do a great job at doing that. So you really are a shining example for me and for many other people, of women, especially women over 50, and you're carving out a path for us and how to approach supplementation and what we can experiment with. So that is my own personal take on this book. And I highly recommend people to read it. So I want to talk a little bit about the system, the rating system, because you covered this in really great detail in the first book, and you kind of had a more of a condensed, easy to understand, not that it wasn't easy to understand the first book, but you have a really condensed version, which I thought was really great in terms of how you're rating different supplements according to the 7 tenets, seven tenets. So maybe you should explain a little bit your rating system and how people know, why did these 28, for example, make it in this book?
Sure. So as everyone knows, or maybe not everyone, I set out on the idea that you aged for 7 reasons, as you said, the 7 tenets. And you're right, book 1 was a little bit extensive. There's an entire half a book to explain each of these 7 tenets. And I certainly was not going to go through that again, because it's pretty damn dry. But then the question is what does a supplement do in each of these 7 tenets, right? This is the good news versus the bad news thing. And so what I did is I went through probably hundreds of agents, because everyone says, oh, I take X, it's really good for you. So I would look up X, and it may be really good in one category, but maybe it didn't do so many things in other categories. So I was looking for really well-rounded, standout agents that people could embrace. And that's not to say that if I didn't include it, it's a bad one. It just didn't hold the candle to the ones that made the book. So a lot of things, and maybe they'll be in book 3 or book 4, but these I thought were like amazing agents that do many things in many categories. And the way I figured this out is I looked at each of the 7 tenets, and I read, oh my gosh, zillions of articles. I can't even tell you. There are in fact 40 pages of citations, but there's probably triple that I've actually read through, right? And the question is, did a molecular agent, was it due to your DNA? And I discovered a really more than we talk about in book 1. So book 1, it's basically, does it affect your telomere length and does it affect your epigenetics? But book 1 also covers how to structurally protect your DNA. And there are several agents that do that are very important, right? And then of course I looked at mitochondria and the pathways, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Excuse me, I'm burping. And of course, if an agent did something in a test tube or in theory, but there was no real evidence yet, of course, it got a 1. If there was an evidence in laboratory animals, and one study didn't really count, right? It had to be a couple. It had to be pretty clear that something was efficacious. It would get a 2. And if there were human studies, it would get a 3. I think a lot of these things are a bit unknown. And so I think that it's a conservative rating system. I think that over time, we're going to look more at these particular agents, do human studies, and say, yeah, this really is beneficial. It should get a 3 in this category. But at the moment, we just don't have them. So what I like to say, and you probably read it and chuckled in the first chapter, these are very conservative. It's hard to hide evidence. It generally just generates more evidence. And so agents are going to get stronger and stronger over time. But based on me stopping research, which is right now, they are what they are because of what's available at this moment. So they will change over time. And over time, I will change them. But the other idea is to create an encyclopedia of longevity agents. I started with the first 15, and granted, there's probably need to be updated, but now you've got an additional 28. And the idea is ultimately to have a list on, available to everyone that says, when you're looking to take something new, what do I want to take? Why do I want to take it? How does it interact with other things? And that way people have a comprehensive understanding of exactly when they go to develop their protocols.
So wait, did you say that you have 15 other agents different that are for longevity specifically, or because these all seem pretty longevity type, causing autophagy?
These are all longevity. Book 1 had 15 agents.
Oh, the first one. Sorry,
we went through resveratrol, right, and nicotinamide and pterostilbene and curcumin and all of the classics.
Yeah.
This is additional 28. Some people have heard of them, some people have not. But the idea is to have more choices and more information.
Yeah, because the first book was, I learned so much from that. And I think, everyone I know who's read it, we've moved to experimenting with them, and now they sound more mainstream. But these ones that you're talking about now are, I know about 9 of them or so, and the others, I'm like, where in the world did these come from? So it's really nice to have to be able to experiment, because everybody reacts differently to different agents. But I'm wondering then, because with your rating system, it was awesome that in the end of the book, you also had the, which ones got the best ratings. And there were 3. There were 3 that made the top, the top 3, you had all of them. These are all great, but there were top 3 that had the best scores. So they were Fisetin, Lactoferrin, and Spermidine. So in terms of these scores, and I can't remember, I think Fisetin was like a 17 and Lactoferrin and Spermidine were about a 14, but the other agents, I don't remember in the first book. Do you remember if they had a better scores or the same, or I can't even remember anymore.
So the spread is roughly the same. In the first book, the resveratrol, pterostilbene, nicotinamide did extremely well. I think that Fisetin and Spermidine are probably have higher scores. I wish I could remember. My knack for details at this point, there's all a little fuzzy. But these are the heavy hitters. Definitely So when you want to rethink your pile, depending on how many you want to take, I would stick with the original panacea, and then I would add these additional 3 without question. And then the other ones are, the numbers are lower, but they have their specific categories that they do amazing things in. So then it becomes more specific to the organ system or the concern that you have specifically.
That's why the app was so good, because we could plug in our issues if we had a history of heart disease or if we had diabetes or whatever it was. And so it's great because that you did a lot of work with that in that algorithm. So I'm waiting for that to come back. So but the panacea I think is quite good for most people. And I want to talk a little bit about Fisetin right now, because I is it Fisetin or Fistin? Fisetin, right?
It's funny. We all live in isolation. I say Fisetin, but
Oh,
I've heard it pronounced many, many, many ways. So
I,
I don't know who gets to decide.
yeah, I did hear about it from Sean Wells. I remember he mentioned it. It's something he like really loved. I'd never dug real deep into it. So, but it was an interesting study, because this is a podcast for women over 50. And you mentioned a study that was done, alleviation by Fisetin of frailty, inflammation, and related measures in older adults. And so what I found out here, that was causing autophagy, which is great, the cellular cleanup that we all need, especially as we age, and recycling process. And then we have it's wonderful for the brain, people who have asthma, bone issues, and fat. Who else made that? So what is it? Do you remember, with Fisetin, what about these, why is it so good for the brain, for example? Or the autophagy, is it better than some other things that we know that create autophagy?
So that's an excellent question. And the problem with when someone says, is it better than this or that? There are very few comparative studies. What happens is they take cell cultures or animals and they give them X agents, and then they measure the result. And they say, this is amazing, or this is terrible, or this is moderate. Very few head-to-head studies. I would love to see it compared to Spermidine, which is one of the big things with autophagy, as you know. They frequently work through the same pathway. But to back up, so Fisetin is a naturally occurring agent. It's sort of related to quercetin structurally. One's from onions, one's from strawberries. And it does amazing things. So it is a flavonoid. It's a free radical scavenger. It's an antioxidant. I'm convinced that anything that is an anti-inflammatory as well, it activates the NRF2 system, is actually good for us semi-postmenopausal women, because I don't know if I am or not. Because it just retains bone, which is extremely important, decreases the activity of osteoclasts, which is nice. It does activate autophagy, which is extraordinarily important. But one of the big things it does, which is super important, is it helps clean out the senescent cells. And that's one of the big reasons that it's included, because that and quercetin are really the only 2 agents that we have over the counter that can do it. That's why it's so crucial.
I know. Okay, so let's review a little bit senescent cells, because maybe for some people they haven't heard of this zombie cells, or how would you explain senescent cells?
So I like to think of them as grumpy old man cells, right? That's my favorite little, because I can picture the guy sitting there. He's like, so at one point, follow me with this one. This is going to sound ridiculous. A normal dude, he's a worker, he's fine, he's cool, he's hanging out, he's doing his job, right? So 30 years later, he's in the same factory, he's fat, he's lazy, he's grumpy, and exuding just negative comments about everything. That's your senescent cell, right? These cells start normal, and then they become abnormal. They lose their morphology, they become chunky. The organelles don't function as well. They exude negative inflammatory cytokinins. And they just cause a lot of problems around the body. And it's demonstrated that if you get rid of these cells, number one, you do better. And number two, that they're replaced by normal cells. And they're also a bit contagious. So one cell can cause another cell next door to become senescent as well. So anytime you have a nidus of these cells, it just leads to extreme pathology, and you want to get rid of them. The only real studies are focused around dinacetab, Fisetin, and quercetin. Dinacetab is impossible to get. It's a chemotherapy agent. I've managed to sort of get it because I convinced a chemical supply house that I'm actually a researcher. So I just eat it, which I shouldn't, but I do. But the other two are available over the counter, so that anyone can do.
Okay. And do you know Fisetin versus quercetin? You said there's no head-to-head studies, but if you had to choose one, would it be the Fisetin? Because I think you had quercetin also in the book, if I remember.
Quercetin, right. So quercetin is in book 1, because that was 3 years ago. And the idea of these grumpy old man cells was brand new. No one knew anything. I put it in there because I thought it was interesting and I thought it would lead to something. But since then, we know a ton more. There haven't really been any head-to-head Fisetin versus quercetin. But what I do think is apparent is that not all old man cells are the same. And they respond differently to different agents. So I actually mixed it up. And what's interesting is in low doses, both of these agents help you in one aspect. And in high doses, they help you in another aspect. So for example, they both stabilize mast cells, which blocks histamine release, so they're anti-allergy, right? And you just need a little of that a day to have a positive effect. But higher doses are what you need to get rid of the senescent cells. So what I do is I take a small dose of each of them every day. And then once a month, I take a high dose of one of them for 2 days. So I sort of alternate, 1 month it's quercetin, 1 month it's Fisetin. The idea being, I want to get rid of many different types of senescent cells as I can.
That's such a great idea. I just loved, you're sharing how you take it. And I think that's super vital. It's not just taking supplements, but how you take them, when you take them. And you give you have a great list of dosage as well. If people are confused, you've got a whole chapter on dosage. So if you guys are interested in having how much, you're probably going, I want to go buy Fisetin right now. Like you got to figure out, in the book, as well as but your website is great with dosages from the first book. Will you be having the dosages as well on your website for the second?
So I have to tell you that my person, who always changes what I'm supposed to call him, my graphic designer, artistic lead, whatever he is, he's really good at doing one thing at a time. So as soon as the book is absolutely complete, his next assignment is upgrading the website and putting all of the new information on there. So over time, hopefully a few weeks after the book comes out, everything will be available.
Cool. Okay. So you did mention that Fisetin is good for fat. Yes. Does that mean fat burning? What exactly, do you remember how? Because I know there's so many agents here. Get them all straight in your head.
So
but
what's fun about fat, so I don't exactly remember which one it does, but getting rid of fat is a fantastic game to play. Because there are 7 or 8 reasons or ways to get rid of fat. And everyone always loves this conversation, except Magdalena, because she's already uber skinny and she doesn't need my help.
She needs more fat.
She does. She needs a fat infusion. We can all loan her some. It'll be great. But one of the ways that you can do this is you can change the ratio of brown fat to white fat. This is one of my favorite things to do. And you increase something called the uncoupling protein in your mitochondria, which makes it less efficient, which is not great for athletes, but it's great for weight loss. So you're burning energy just by making heat. And there are a bunch of agents that will increase that ratio. And if I may be mistaken, but I believe Fisetin is on that list. But there are probably 5 or 6 fantastic agents in the book that do that. And so it really, really, really helps. And the other cool thing that we should mention is that I kind of, in the first book, pretended like all cells were the same. And yeah, this sort of helps with that system or another system. What I've done in book 2 is at the beginning of each chapter, there's icons representing all of the different body systems. So as soon as you flip to a chapter, or you look at the graph in the back, it'll tell you, if you want to lose weight, you look at the little fat icon, which is a little fat dude, because I didn't really know how to demonstrate fat. That was actually quite an interesting, how do we get to a fat guy without being offensive? We started out being a fat mouse, and they're like, no, that looks ridiculous. They think we're turning you into rodents. Anyway, there's just this fat dude. Anyway, if you go down the fat column, it'll tell you what gets rid of fat. And then there's a synopsis in the last chapter that tells you exactly which agent does what in terms of getting rid of fat. Because I'm convinced that if you take one agent from each of the different aspects, a multimodal approach to getting rid of fat is better than overdosing on a single agent.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great approach. I think this is why this book has to be a reference guide. When you have it on your shelf, you go, today we're going to go into fat burning or fat, get rid of it. Let's just get all these agents now. But it was also interesting when it comes to Fisetin, you mentioned strawberries have it, but you got to eat a lot of them or something, right?
Yeah, you have to eat so many strawberries, you would turn into a strawberry. I mean, it's absurd. And I find it really interesting because the first question that everyone always asks is, okay, they're from strawberries or blueberries or whatever the fruit happens to be. Can't I just eat that? And the answer is, well, that's a very healthy diet, but there is no way you can consume enough of it to actually make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it depends on how committed one is. If we want to eat a healthy diet, fantastic. If you want to truly biohack, that's not going to work.
Yeah, that's the thing. It doesn't mean you shouldn't eat your strawberries, but you can't expect some miracles that are coming out of these studies about Fisetin, for example, and expecting that to come from the strawberries, but eat your strawberries. They're good for you. But I always think, let's just get a couple of supplements to fill in the gaps, let's say. I would never recommend somebody to just take the supplements and forget the strawberries and forget the healthy diet. I prefer to bang it out at all ends. So, okay. So let's talk about lactoferrin, because this one is also a brand new one for me. And, what were do you remember the systems that it targeted? So I didn't write them
Oh
down.
gosh. So lactoferrin was one of the last ones I looked at, and I stumbled upon this and I was astounded that I had not heard of it before. I love lactoferrin. It's on top of the fact that it's just sort of comical. And actually some of these are kind of comical. So lactoferrin, so to give you sort of a baseline, obviously comes from milk, right? Lacto, milk, ferrin carries iron. So if you want to imagine this molecule, it looks a bit like a barbell, right? There's a glob on one side, a glob on the other side, and it has a little attachment chain, right? So it's a barbell. And in each side of the barbells, there's little cavities and they carry iron molecules, right? And you don't want iron molecules floating around in your vasculature by themselves because they can be rather toxic. So they need to be contained and taken to where you actually need them to be used appropriately, be it in other enzymes or red cells or whatever have you. But that's not why we're taking lactoferrin. Lactoferrin is super cool because those little cavities also can carry glucose molecules. And this is what piqued my interest in the beginning. So instead of having an iron molecule in there, it bonds with glucose and it gets rid of AGEs. So basically it's a 2-for-1. You have a molecule of lactoferrin, it takes 2 glucoses and then you excrete it out. So no harm, no foul, right? Interesting though. So lactoferrin, on top of carrying an iron, is also important in the immune system. And people actually measure lactoferrin levels and they say, haha, your lactoferrin is high, you must have an inflammatory process. Because as your inflammatory process revs up, the lactoferrin gets excreted from your cells and then it shuts down the entire immune system, right? If we take exogenous lactoferrin, it tells our immune system to shut down earlier rather than later, preventing a lot of the inflammatory cascade.
Interesting.
So if you're going to take this, I tell people to check with or to tell their primary care physician, because your labs are going to look really wackadoodle. But in fact, it's helpful to take the exogenous stuff because it helps with your immune system, makes you less inflamed, gets rid of glucose, and does just a variety of amazing things around your body.
Yeah. Now you mentioned AGEs, and in case anybody doesn't know, they're advanced glycation end products. And you explained this so well also in the first book. And I just love the way people can understand that, okay, AGE is a perfect acronym because it ages you, AGEs, right? And these are this is like glucose binding to a protein and folding them and causing damage and not only, wrinkles, but all this stuff on the inside. So I always remember AGE is really, because I always think of, wrinkles. I think of the outside of the body when I think of AGEs ever since I learned about them. But you made it really clear that what's happening on the outside is also happening on the cells on the inside of the body, which can be dangerous as well. So, AGEs, anything that takes away the AGEs, I'm all for them. And lactoferrin is one of them. So lactoferrin and even Fisetin, is that something easy to find in a pharmacy, or where do you get these things?
It's extremely easy to find. One of the things that my process is, I will look at an agent, and I stumbled upon lactoferrin because interestingly enough, someone in the 80s patented it, is putting it in the fluid for dialysis to suck glucose out of people with kidney failure.
Oh.
I don't know if they actually use this or not, but that was the original reason that I got interested in lactoferrin, because it's this fantastic ability to get rid of AGEs. And then I discovered 17 other amazing things. But before I completely commit to it, I Google it. Can you actually buy lactoferrin? And it turns out you absolutely can. Many, many varieties of lactoferrin. There's cow lactoferrin, there's camel lactoferrin, which in fact led me down this crazy path. Apparently there is like 200 and some times the amount of lactoferrin in camel milk than cow milk.
Wow.
So I bought camel milk, and I tried to buy.
Where in the world do you find camel milk? I was in Kazakhstan and I was like, finally I could get camel milk and horse milk, and that was the only place I've ever seen it.
Well, so interestingly, my sister lives in Abu Dhabi and she's like, oh yeah, I'll mail you some. But I ended up buying powdered camel milk on Amazon, and I kind of goofed and I bought powdered chocolate camel milk.
Oh, that would be better, because it's pretty disgusting. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's horrible. So I tried to make camel milk brownies, thinking that this would be just like the end all be all of health food. It was horrific. It was so intolerable. The pan sat there. No one touched them. It was pills are so much easier. I do not recommend camel milk brownie chocolate bars of any nature. They were horrible.
Oh my gosh. But it is super interesting that there's so much more lactoferrin in camel milk than in cow milk. So that's just makes me wonder about populations that actually do drink the cow milk, and if they are any bit healthier than anybody drinking cow milk. But, probably could be some many other properties within lactoferrin. So we can find these things. Okay. Cause that's one thing in the book I didn't see is I like this brand, I like that brand, or something like that, unless I missed it.
No, so I do not try to recommend brands unless it's very important. Mm-hmm. So number one, by the time a book is out there, who knows what companies are actually going to still be making things and still not, right? Mm-hmm. Nor do I have a company that breaks down anyone's products to determine how fantastic they are, right? I read a ton, and you try to go by reputation, and you try to go by, a variety of things to determine what's appropriate and what's not. That being said, some agents, it's very important that you get a good brand, and some are not, right? It also depends on how they process it. So my favorite example is curcumin, right? Everyone's like, oh yeah, I eat turmeric or I eat curcumin. Well, the bioavailability is so terrible that now there's the competing war to make it more and more bioavailable. So, I use metacurcumin that comes from Rev Genetics, but there are a zillion other technologies available, right? Which then makes dose impossible, because the doses aren't going to be the same for something at a nanomolecule versus something that's not. So it's really, really hard. So when people go to get these things, number one, read your bottles very carefully. Everyone that's biohacking by definition is going to be reasonably intelligent. I've never met a dumb biohacker. People know what they're doing. So read the bottles, check the brands, know what you're getting, know how bioavailable anything is. That's the only advice I can offer, because I am not going to go out there and recommend brand X. I just don't know enough to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are a few that I do, but in general, especially for lactoferrin, I don't know. Buy yourself a camel. That's all I know. That'd be great.
Well, one suggestion I have, if you're ever up for, and you're a practicing doctor, you don't have time for this, although I do know doctors who do this, but it would be great if you had like on your story in Instagram, for example, or Facebook, and you say, this is what I'm taking today. And people see the brands and whatever it is, whether they can get it or not, it works for you. That's what you're doing. People just would love that. So that's my own personal request, because I understand that if you write it in a book or even in your website, you did have few, and then when I clicked on it, they're out of stock or they don't make it anymore. And I understand that, a conundrum. So stories, that's in the moment. It's a possibility, because
I will take your advice and I will do my best.
Yeah, there's so I do think there is, the person who's taught me so much about how to buy a supplement and what to look for is Sean Wells. He's an ingredientologist.
Yes.
He's got a great book, The Energy Formula. It's another reference that I have. And I think he teaches you what to look out for. So if anybody's not in the biohacking world, if they're very new, there's a little plug for Sean. I think he's great. Okay, you did mention in the book that it takes time to start seeing some effects, maybe 3 to 6 months. Why do they take so long?
So that's an excellent question. And I put 3 to 6 months in there because it just depends on who you are and how old you are and what your medical problems are and what's bothering you.
Mm-hmm.
So it is easy to see weight loss quickly, right? It is easy to see aches and pains go away quickly. Depending on how bad your skin is, you could make it, be better in probably a month or two. But some things just take more time, right? And some things you'll never see. But for people to truly embrace the idea that they are feeling better, I want them to give it time, because this is not Tylenol, right? People go, oh, I took a Tylenol, 3 hours ago and my headache is gone. Haha. Aging doesn't work that way. Aging is about rebuilding the system depending on where you started from. So if you're 35 or 40, it's not going to take so long. If you're 70 or 80, it's going to take a bit of time, right? So I have to write to a wide audience on the assumption that everyone's different, and I need to give people practical appreciations of what's coming down the pike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That is true. Absolutely true. I think I completely agree. And people are impatient. We want results right now, but if they can just give it time, that's what I do with my supplements as well. So, I want to ask, the agents, there are 28 of them in the new one, and there's 15 in the old one. Are you taking all of them?
I am such a glutton. Yes, I am. Do I take them all every day? Usually. I have my morning pile, and then I have my afternoon pile. And then I top it off a little bit at night. But yes, I guilty as charged. I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I do way more than even the book, because now that the book is taken care of, I've sort of ventured into actual pharmaceuticals to sort of see what we can hack out of those. I'm not ready to present that to people right now because, people seem to take drugs a little bit more seriously than they take molecular agents that are over the counter.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that there's a lot of amazing things out there in the pharmaceutical world. So I actually take more than what I tell people because it's embarrassing.
Well, ever since that first interview, I loved that hack where I just spread them out. And you talked about having a half-life and just good to let them, all spread out. And it makes it easier as well to just swallow, literally. There's one agent that we didn't talk about is Spermidine. This is one that I know, and I'm the Spermidine queen. I love this agent. I was so happy to find it. I think it's about a year and a half ago or so. And then you had this in the book, which was so exciting. What is it about Spermidine? And that was one of the top 3. What was it about Spermidine that you think is what's the best thing about it?
So I stumbled upon Spermidine completely and utterly by accident. And I was just, again, shocked that I had not heard of this before. And it did 2 things that I thought were more important than anything else that we had not had an agent for. And I will tell you that I read a lot about other agents, and they're frequently, they fall into categories that are very similar to things that we already know about. And it would give us more tools in the same category, which is nice. But Spermidine stood out because it answered 2 questions, or it filled 2 gaps that we didn't have. And I will explain this sort of by talking about the molecule itself. So it is called a polyamine. And for people that are not chemists, it is a long chain. That's it. Just it's a line. There's no fancy circles, no carbon. It's just, though there's carbon. It's just a long chain, right? It's a line, and it's positively charged. And why this is important is for category 1. DNA is negatively charged. And DNA gets attacked by many things: free radicals, radiation, just a variety of insults, which lead to DNA failure and cancer and that sort of thing. Spermidine, because it's this positively charged line, lines up on the minor and major grooves of DNA and just sticks. Doesn't change your DNA, it protects it. And I decided on a visualization level that it was sort of like bubble wrapping your DNA.
Yeah.
Nothing else that we know of does this. Like magnesium will help support it, and Fisetin will help support the 3D structure, but nothing packages it quite as well as Spermidine. And I know it works in a test tube, and I ran this by some genius folks that I know, and they're like, they kind of think that the idea of bubble wrapping your DNA is probably a little crazy, but it works on a chemical level. And I'm convinced that it will in fact protect your DNA from some of the damages that are inflicted upon it. So I actually think it's going to help decrease rate of cancer. I think it's going to decrease the rate of like bad epigenetic modification. So that I think is huge all by itself, right? The second category that is equally as amazing is autophagy.
Yeah.
There are some things that promote autophagy, but nothing as clearly and as powerfully as Spermidine.
Or as easy, because fasting and exercise is also activates autophagy, right?
There are lots of things that do it, but in terms of doing it extraordinarily well,
and an easy way, Spermidine,
extraordinarily easy.
Yeah, I agree.
Now granted, the drawback is that it is pricey.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that some agents brand matters and some it doesn't. And in this case, brand matters. So I have fallen in love with Primidine.
Me too.
As promoted and owned by Leslie Kenney, who's now a good friend.
Yeah. Where did she go?
Nothing to do with the fact that, brand versus person, I should separate them. But their company is outstanding. And I think their product is outstanding, because getting something that's suboptimal in this case isn't going to help you.
Oh, really? Why?
I don't think so, because it has to be very clean. It has to be able to get into your DNA and wrap it around it and protect it. And I just think they do an amazingly good job of producing a clean spermidine, right? Now, some things it doesn't matter. Like carnosine is one of my favorite examples. It's a dipeptide. Anybody can make a dipeptide. There's nothing fancy about that whatsoever, right? Buy the cheapest version of carnosine you possibly can. It makes no difference whatsoever, right? Astaxanthin, on the other hand, you kind of want the nice stuff, because the other stuff falls apart. It's photosensitive, doesn't do as well.
Astaxanthin falls into the category. Yeah. So you said because you got cut off. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So yeah, astaxanthin can be light sensitive. The lesser brands don't work as well. So astaxanthin is one of those things where brand is very important, and as is spermidine.
Interesting. Yes. So definitely. I do you know Dr. Lauren Bramley? She goes to a lot of these.
Not personally.
Okay. She goes to a lot of the conferences that you go to. And she mentioned, I don't know if you, Magdalena, remember, it was like a Hawaiian bioastin or something. I think it was bioastin.
Oh, yes.
The one.
Bioastin, Hawaiian. Yeah.
Yeah.
The best bioastin or the best astaxanthin comes from Hawaii, Japan, or Iceland.
Oh, interesting. Okay. This is good. This is important to know. So I hopefully got the right astaxanthin. I definitely have the right spermidine. I was convinced from the beginning, because when I started to experiment with it, I felt some great results. I saw it in my HRV. I could see my sleep. I could see, some scores that were doing really well. And then I'd go off of it, and then it would kind of go down. And I still continue to experiment with Primidine. I should probably test other ones just to see the difference. I always love doing that. But when I started to share this with my friends, and then they got good results, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to put this on some social media. Let's see if people have the same results. And I have to say, out of any supplement that I've recommended, the overwhelming feedback from Primidine was amazing. and people just sending me this crazy stuff. And I'm like, okay, now I'm 100% convinced with Primidine, at least, because I really have seen the results myself, but with other people as well. So you don't see that a whole lot in supplements where people are so excited about it.
I think that is, no, but I think that's because it's filling the gaps that we haven't filled before, right? Our free radicals are all scavenged. Our sirtuins are activated. None of us are nicotinamide deficient anymore. We've done that. We've reached the level where all the basics are taken, right? But before, we didn't have anything good for autophagy, and our DNA was left unprotected. And granted, it does a few other good things too, but those are the big two. And so I think that anytime we find a gap that needs to be filled, it helps. The other interesting thing, and this is going to be a little science geeky, but I talk about it in the book. I've discovered something called the mitochondrial transition pore. And when you're, I'm so sorry, I'm in the hospital and there's overhead going on. We cut that part out. Apparently there's an emergency too.
Okay, anyway, we can edit it out.
The mitochondrial perfect. So the mitochondrial transition pore, one of my recent findings in the last year or two, opens and closes very, very, very quickly, and it lets out a little bit of pressure on your mitochondria, which is a good thing. It's called the flicker. But when it opens up a lot, it can cause significant damage to both the mitochondria and the cell, and it can cause cell death. And so, of course, as we get older, bad things happen. This pore stays open longer and longer and longer. And spermidine is one of 3 things that can actually control the flicker rate of your mitochondrial of these pores. Now, you'll never notice this, but it should translate into more energy over time.
Oh,
can't prove it, but it should.
Yeah. Oh, how interesting. Yeah, no, that is, I think the whole, we're learning so much more about mitochondria. People are talking more about it, at least in the biohacking circles. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So if you guys, are lost, go back to biology from high school. That's where your energy is made. And so we always want to keep your mitochondria strong, but it also is for every single cellular function. We need good mitochondria and enough, right? So I love that. I didn't know that spermidine did that. I must have missed that part, because I just, there's just the information comes so fast. And I guess a lot of studies are being done on spermidine right now as well. Looking at more human studies. And that's what's the most interesting. Do Fisetin and Lactoferrin have some good human studies, or do you remember? Because I know they got good scores.
So Fisetin, right. So Fisetin is having them now. There are a few people that are obsessed out there with Fisetin, and they are definitely doing human studies. Some of the results were in when I finished up the book, and some of them were not. In terms of Lactoferrin, the only true human things are anecdotal. Because basically it's where people drink camel milk, and so they say, X number of people had so many, cups of milk and blah, 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 blah. So it's not a true study, it's just anecdotal. But again, it goes back to the scoring system. The more human studies there are, the more these scores are going to go up. And, no doubt Fisetin will go up, and no doubt spermidine will go up.
Interesting. Speaking of spermidine, we got Leslie here, and
I know she's dancing. It's fantastic.
She took her spermidine today. And Leslie's really on top of the studies when it comes to spermidine as well. So, do you know what are the latest studies done on humans, or ones that are coming out? And actually, you can unmute Leslie, because we probably need to hear you.
Sure. There are studies right now using 6 milligrams of spermidine.
6 milligrams. Because the normal dosage is 1, right?
Is 1. That's right. Those are the studies that have been done so far. I believe there was another one done with 4 milligrams. There was one in Canada done with 5 milligrams, but they made sure they had a certain amount of spermine in there. And I don't know what the exact ratios were, but that particular one I think was 5 milligrams. So there have been higher doses. What the exact ratio with the other polyamines, putrescine, and spermine are, I don't know.
But those are ongoing, or what are the results? So
We
if we
don't know
take
the
more, is
results of
better?
the we don't know the results of the 6 milligram one. That one is being done in older adults. So these would be those over, I believe, the age of 65. So that's for immune, for those with lower immune function.
Yeah, you missed the first part where we were talking about, yeah, you may need higher doses for older adults or people who have more damage, or to wait a little bit longer for things to kick in. So that would be interesting to know the differences between the dosages in younger and older adults. So keep us posted, Leslie.
Of course.
So, okay, this is great. So Dr. Kaufman, let's you take all of these, which are pretty amazing. But so you got a great protocol on how to space them out. Is there, I know I asked you this question before in our last interview, but let's keep it, and I know what the answer is for this one, but let's keep it to the ones that are in the book. If there is one or two, let's say in the new book, okay, that you would have to take, could only take, which ones would they be?
That is an impossible question. That's like asking me to choose between my children. I couldn't possibly do that. I think it would be mood dependent. I think that sometimes when I'm feeling not so smart, I feel like I should pop more magnesium threonate, for example, because I just feel like I multitask significantly better. I can tell you when I ache after being at the gym for far too long, I probably should take more Fisetin and clean out my my senescent cells. Other times I feel like I should take, I can't even begin to tell you. If I look at myself and I go, wow, my muscles are looking pretty wimpy, I think I should take some more ursolic acid. And then I look at Magdalena, I'm like, oh my gosh, my collagen is lacking. I need to sort of like up my collagen production here. This is ridiculous. So yeah. I couldn't choose between my children. That's an impossible question.
It's a mean question. I know. Do you ever worry about synergistic effects in terms of dosages?
So that's an interesting question. What I personally do may or may not be right for anyone else. But in study after study where they take 2 to 3 things that are, positive for you and they combine them, it's demonstrated that you can take them in reduced doses. So I generally take 1/3 to 1/2 of any recommended dose because I take 50 of them. Is that the right thing to do? This is an educated guess. I don't actually know. But I take a lot of actual pharmaceuticals as well. And I do the same thing. I take them in minute doses on the assumption that I'm going to sort of reap the benefits that they have without the dose dependent side effects that you can bring on with them.
And do you ever?
Plus, it's cheaper.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, you're right. And this can add up a lot. So I do the same as well, where I just kind of keep doses down unless I need double dose of something. And then I feel like, okay, make up for it. But I'm wondering, do you have to be honest, most supplements, I don't feel anything. I just have to assume. And I like to measure. I sometimes see stuff on my Oura ring or my scores, but I don't feel it, but I see the difference. But is there any that you absolutely feel like right away?
Astaxanthin.
Really? What do you feel?
Well, if I don't take my astaxanthin, 2 things happen. Number 1, my fingers are killing me and my skin burns. I mean, granted, I live in Miami Beach, right? Yeah. So I am out in the sun all the time. I have a convertible. If I take my astaxanthin, my 12 milligrams on a regular basis, I am fine. The absence of taking it is horrible. So that's probably the only one true thing that I would see immediately.
Interesting. Do you wear sunscreen?
I should, but I kind of forget. And I will tell you, I swim a lot and I try to do it when the sun's not out, but that never works because it's Miami. But if I am on my protocol, I don't burn at all. I don't have one mark on me from the sun.
It's amazing. It's
And
exactly
I am
what
super pale. I don't know if anyone can see this or they're just listening to it. I am like whiter than white, which is, I don't have a whole lot of melanin here to protect me.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's exactly what Dr. Lauren Bramley said in terms of astaxanthin. And in fact, she doesn't wear sunscreen, which shocked me. But says it's that powerful. And I would still take both, me personally, because I'm just too scared to experiment with that. But it's amazing you say, that you do see a difference, that you don't actually burn with the astaxanthin.
So that being said, I'm not completely paranoid. Well, that's not true. I am paranoid, but I'm not completely giving everything up to astaxanthin. So what I do know is that you have theoretical risk of DNA damage from the sun, right? And even if you don't see erythema or you don't see it or feel it, it's probably there. So as a consequence, there's two things that you can take that actually increase DNA repair rates. So I take something, it's polypodium. It's sold as something called fern block. And then there's something called AC11. And they both are demonstrated to absolutely increase DNA repair rates in your skin after sunning. So I take both of them.
Oh, wow. Like damage control.
It is absolutely damage control. And I'm assuming, right? I mean, all the studies are done on skin, but I am assuming that it probably is not only helping the DNA, in your fibroblasts, but also all over your body. So if anyone has a family history of cancer or like a lot of cancer is the inability to repair your own DNA. So by sort of stoking that up, I'm not saying you're not going to get cancer, but you may reduce relative risk.
Absolutely. So that's good. This is prevention, this is protection, and this is damage control all rolled up into one. And that's why we crazy supplement junkies love to do all of this stuff. And you can make it affordable if you use Dr. Kaufman's recommendations of spreading them out, taking half dosages and all that. So you experiment at your own risk, that's for sure. I want to open up the panel to anyone who has questions. I know Magdalena always has great comments and great questions. So let's start with you, Magdalena.
Do you hear me? Hello again, Dr. Kaufman. So happy to see you again. And I'm so sad.
You look as beautiful as always. I always have to say that.
We need your application to come back because I'm lost without your application.
Oh,
so
I'm so sorry.
that you told us that you're working on it because I thought it's like over forever. And now
I'm working on
additional 25 molecular agents, we definitely need it because I don't know how to incorporate into my
protocol.
Yeah, exactly. I will definitely buy Fisetin or Fisetin. I've heard about it. Do you remember when you had at Radfest the presentation? I think it was 2019. At that time, I think it was the owner of Life Extension. He was talking a lot about Fisetin at that time. And it was like something I've heard for the first time. But I thought if I am taking quercetin, it's like enough. Now you said it's great to make a combination of both. Can you say what is the high dosage? This is something what I would like to hear because, we are overfilled with these supplements anyway, but maybe if something is too much, it's maybe not good. So I would like to hear what is this high dosage once a month to be taken. You mentioned before that you are taking high dosage only 1 day a month, right?
So it's right. So it's 2 days a month. That's just only because that's what studies have used, is 2 days a month. So the dose is really hard because it depends on the type you are taking. I use a company called Rev Genetics, and everything is in a nanomycel. So the dose is significantly different than a straight typical type of dose. So if you send me an email with the brand that you're taking, I will calculate your regular dose and then your bolus dose. But I can tell you that since we're all junkies and we're taking far too many, half dose for you with a half a dose of quercetin on a regular basis, and then with the boluses would be sufficient. But again, it's so hard to tell unless you know how it's packaged in the capsule.
I'm following your recommendation from the first book. I think it's 500 milligrams of quercetin. Fisetin, I'm not taking yet, but I will definitely.
But is it the nanomycel or is it standard dose?
Standard dose of 500 milligrams, one capsule.
Okay, so you know what? Send me an email and we're going to redo your system, because I know so much more now than I knew 3 years ago that I think we're just going to revamp it head to toe.
Great. Super. Thank you.
Plus, I feel bad that the app doesn't work. So I've known you for years, sort of. I am more than happy to do this.
No, I'm just happy now because you said that it's coming back, and that's all what we need to know. Because, you know, also my friends, we were talking about it and we were really all sad, because I think this was the first app which was really helpful regarding supplementing, because we biohackers are taking so many, you know, and if you have a guide, it's really, I think, a need to have it, because we can be overdosed with everything. So praying to be back soon.
You and me both. I'm really working on it.
And now I'm happy because you told us that you are taking everything, because I'm also taking.
Oh, I do, but in smaller doses.
So
smaller
if you
doses.
take everything, I'm feeling on a safe side, because I thought that nobody is taking so many things as I do. So now I am a little bit, how to say, feeling safe. Okay, thank you.
Good. Good. Well, I'm always here for your questions anytime.
Thank you. I know I have sent you so many messages and emails, and you are always so kind to answer immediately. I have to tell to everybody that Dr. Kaufman is really always there for every question. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
No.
And Leslie as well, you know. I think that Zora is taking under the, how to say, under the, let me say, into her group of these biohackers. So many nice women, we know now each other so well, even maybe not meet each other, you know.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, you know, we are friends for a few years now, and I think that the right people staying together in this group, because it's not only, you know, that there are people who know something about longevity and we can get some information, but it's also, you know, you can feel the heart, you know, the good, only the good, you know, because people are here helping with the information, with the knowledge, with the experience, and I think it's really the right place to be. This group of biohacking 50 plus. Thank you, Zora. I'm always happy to participate or to listen only.
Thank you. I love this group. I love it. It's unbelievable. We haven't actually seen each other in person, but we feel like we've known each other forever. Same thing. I mean, Dr. Kaufman, when I come to Florida one day, I'm knocking on your door. So thank you. That's wonderful. This group is growing. Their biohackers are very often thought of as young men. And it's wrong, because there are plenty of women here and there are plenty of older women. And this is what I'll be talking about in the Biohacking Congress in Boston in June, about the needs of older women when it comes to biohacking. We take a different approach. So I'd like to ask Leslie, do you have any questions or comments? I know you missed the first part, but it's okay. You can still ask away.
Well, if I can hop in real quick, I just was curious to know, because obviously the second book has a lot of molecules that we can choose from, and spermidine is kind of my sweet spot. If you're taking spermidine, what other molecules would you choose to go with it? What other things sort of layer on well with it that are in the book?
Excellent question. So I would like to point out that the two other people that have read this book are Leslie and Zora. So you guys have a bit of an advantage here. You've also seen all of my blunders and my mistypes and my screw ups. So I feel a little bit whip cornered. I think that's such a tough question. And you know that that's a very tough question because it depends on who you are, how old you are, what your concomitant medical problems are, and what you're already taking. And
Okay.
it sort of explains why there's a numerical rating system and why there's an organ-based system. So if you're completely healthy, then you go for points in every category. And if you're not completely healthy, then you aim for points in the categories of which your illnesses are going to be most important, be it inflammatory or diabetes or metabolic or whatever it is.
So if you've got a history of autoimmune disease, which I have, what other things would you choose, for instance?
So autoimmune is tough because you don't, like, do you activate or deactivate the immune system, right?
Deactivate, right? Yeah.
Right. That's the
We'll just bring it to
question.
homeostasis if possible.
Right. So the key there is to stay away from agents. Well, then, okay, you have to divide category 5. And so I really should do subcategories, but it just makes it more complex. You want to be anti-inflammatory, but you don't want to suppress too much of the immune system. So that's a balance. So the answer is you want minimal points in 5, but you want to maximize everything else. Right, you still want your sirtuins activated. You still need your nicotinamide. You still need to worry about your epigenetics. You still got your AGE problems. So it's just a matter of, I talk about loading some categories. We need to unload that category. And since I will be at your house in a week, I am more than happy to go through this and make a special protocol for you.
Very, very sweet of you. Thank you. Perfect.
And then you'll have to share that stack with us.
Everyone has a different stack. And I don't know. So it's really funny.
I know.
So
we
I
always ask everybody, what are they doing? And in fact, we always have to remember we are individuals, but it's so hard to resist.
Right. So, and the reason I call it a stack is because it physically is a stack. I don't know if I had this before. It physically is a pile of drugs containers that fit together.
I love that.
But every day you have your little container. And when you travel, you have your stack for however many days that you will be traveling. So it is a stack.
Yeah, it is a stack. That's why we call it a stack. I love that.
That's why it's a stack.
I remember did you make those, or you had them made for you or something?
So I have like 5,000 of these, and the goal was to take them to conferences to sell. And then as soon as I got them, COVID hit and there are no conferences. So I use them now to put shampoo in, I put conditioner in them, I put hand lotion in them, I put everyone's drugs in them. I put everything in these things because I have 5,000 of them.
Can we buy them from you?
The next conference, I will bring them. I will hand them out.
I would like to buy. But how can it help? Can it be helpful if you put all the supplements into one? Because I have, something for the morning, something for, let me say, for lunchtime or for a meal. How do you know? Because if I mix everything, I don't know what is certain pill, which is it?
So excellent question. And the answer is I have 2 colors.
Okay. All right.
Right. But I only actually put the lunchtime ones in the containers because I take those to work. My home ones are actually sitting in my cabinet because I'm too lazy to actually separate them. But when I travel, there's 2 colors.
Top.
Brilliant.
Super.
Yeah. It's and then you have to start memorizing the jelly orangey looking ones are your omegas.
Well, at that point, you don't actually, I don't memorize squat. I just put them in category or containers and then we're good. Like so, today is lunchtime category. I have not consumed mine yet, but I will.
Oh, there you go. Let's see it again. Let's see it. Let's count how many are in there.
I don't know. I can see it. There's, I don't know. Oops.
There's
a bunch and they're very colorful. Got the purple delphinidin. We've got the yellow berberine. We've got like all sorts of lovely colors in there. Yeah.
So
delicious.
Why don't you put this on your website and we can buy those containers?
Yeah.
I put it on Instagram once. And then I think 3 people around the world bought them. I'm more than happy. Send me an email. I'm more than happy to send them to anyone.
Okay, there you go, guys.
It's also a great gift for a birthday or something. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah.
Buy for other people, great idea.
I know what to buy Magdalena for her birthday.
Take it away from the old people containers that look like we're old and dying to the more progressive stack of longevity. That's the goal.
Exactly. We are taking these supplements. They are supplements. They are not medicine, right? So I want to open up to Silvina. Do you have any questions? You were at the first.
No, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you because last year I heard you here for the first time and I discovered your book. Well, I first heard from you from Magdalena, but then I heard you in the postcard. I discovered your book, which I have here. I am looking forward to the next book. And I have to say that Astaxanthin, or however you pronounce that, for me, it's been an amazing discovery because I spent, Sora knows, like, I don't know, 8 weeks in the sun last year. And I'm, you know, I'm not whitish, I'm darkish, but I was like, if I had barely been in the sun, it was incredible. And I do put protection and everything, but still, it was really, really good. So
that is fantastic. I'm so happy to hear that. And thank you for reading the book and thank you for joining all of us.
I read it twice. The first time, I have to be very honest, I didn't understand much of it. So I had to, then like a few months later, I read it again. And then I took notes and then I could make more sense of it and decide which ones were the ones I wanted to go for. And of all the ones, I also take a couple of more, but that's the one that I can definitely see from the very first time it make a huge difference.
That is fantastic.
I'm very happy. And I really looking forward to buy those stacks because whenever I travel, I put them in Ziplocs and I put labels on them. And I usually mix two or three, so I know what they are in there. And I mix the morning ones and some in the evening, and I carry my bags with me. And when I went for Christmas, I was away for almost a month. It looked like I had a pharmacy. And I remember you. So it will be much easier to have little stacks. Thank you.
You are very welcome. If you send me an email, I will send you stacks.
Thank you.
Oh, so you guys are listening now on the
What
podcast.
about this second book? Maybe I was a little bit late at the beginning of the interview. Is it possible to buy already? Or?
So close.
Yeah, we haven't spoken about that yet, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
So but where the book is in the process, it's very close. And so, but there's no release date, but by the time we release this podcast, we will have one and we will let you know if you can pre-order it or when the date will be, you can launch it. So I will slip that in somewhere in this podcast so that everybody knows where to buy the book. It's the Kaufman Protocol Aging Solutions. And I'll have links to this as well and tell you exactly where to buy it. Do you have any idea where it will be sold?
Oh, it'll be on Amazon.
Amazon. Okay, fantastic.
It'll be on Amazon. And that being said, I'm not married to the present title. So of the folks that have read this, if you have a better idea, I'll take it.
Okay.
Until it's set in stone, it's not set in stone. So I will take any suggestions.
Oh, good. Okay. I love Aging Solutions. I use that for the podcast. So I do think this is I like that it's a solution. I like that it's, geared towards aging, of course, longevity. This is, but we're going to come up with some cool stuff too. I think you may not have to change it at all, but I think you're on the right track, if at all. I mean, that could be the one, but thank you. We will update this podcast too if it changes, the title changes, we will let you know. Carla, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, actually. Hi, how are you all? I also have the book and it's really good. And I did have a question. We didn't talk about NAT, and I'm so confused with the NAT supplements, because there's a school of people, I don't know if I have it the right way. There's
NAD.
a school of people, the NAD, yes, that says that you should take the NR or the NMN. And then there's this supplement called Nushito that they say that you shouldn't take, like it should be other precursors to increase NAD. So I'm a little confused with that. Like, what's the best way to improve NAT or NAD? I'm sorry.
Excellent question. And depending on who you ask and who they get paid by, you're going to get many different answers.
Okay.
At the baseline, I will tell you that anyone over 40 is probably NAD deficient, right? So I don't know how old you are, but if you're with us, you're probably above 40. Therefore, you are baseline NAD, right? So there is a war about people trying to create something to best fix it. I am not convinced that it really matters all that much. Nicotinamide riboside was the first one available. It was put out by Chromadex. They bought all the trademarks and the patents or whatever one purchases. So no one else could find anything, right? So someone else came up with NMN. It is one enzymatic step different than the NR. I don't think physiologically it makes the hill of beans difference which one you are using, right? That being said, other people thought, oh, well, now we're going to come up with a new way of doing it. So you can have an IV infusion of NAD. You can put it in your nose. You can get a patch. You can take other things with other precursors. I've heard of several of them that people have asked about recently. I'm not convinced that one is better than the other. And no one is going to enter into a head-to-head study because they're going to be afraid to lose, right?
Okay.
So honestly, my solution is I go with the one that's on sale. How pathetic is that? They're expensive. I mean, honestly, it's probably terrible. I don't know which one is better. I can tell you, and the dose is going to be different based on, which one you are choosing. But honestly, I vacillate. I'll take NR for a few months, and then I'll go with NMN for a few months. I don't feel different one way or the other, unless I don't take anything, and then after 10 days, I crash. So clearly it is doing something. I just don't know which one is best. I do know that the IV infusions are a bit ridiculous. No one has ever come to the emergency room dying of an NAD deficiency, so you don't need to shell out $1,000 to go get an infusion. It's kind of fancy and people like to do it because it's cool, but it's horribly unnecessary. Honestly, just get whatever is affordable.
Great. That's good to know.
I love this answer.
And feel free if someone else has a better idea. This is just my impression. I'm clearly not an end-all be-all expert. Well, I know a lot about a lot, but not tons about anything in specific.
I've heard the similar, that the NR versus NMN, not a whole lot different. That's not the first time I've heard that. But when I did the podcast with Nicola Conlon from Nuchido, I really liked her approach because she was saying that she explained it as a factory, kind of like the way you explain things as factories, and fixing the factory so that we can produce our own NAD. And that was absolutely mind-blowing to me. So I'm taking Nuchido because I think that makes a lot more sense to me. But I don't know if you've ever tried it or if you know about, because I think Dr. Nicola Collins been to some of the conferences that you've been to. I don't know. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah. I think there's many ways to skin a cat. I don't really think it makes that much difference. I really don't. They're all pricey and they all sort of fix the problem. So does it really matter?
Or is there a better, cheaper way? Like, I mean, not that it's better, but if they're all kind of equal, is there one that's a bit more affordable?
Well, I will tell you that I cheat the system. I've convinced people that I'm a distributor, despite the fact that I'm not. Like, Lord forbid anyone listen to your podcast here. So I buy things in massive bulk such that I get everything at some very small cost, but I buy it in massive bulk because I know I will be taking a lot and all of my friends sort of, cheese off of my supply house. So I'm sort of a free distributor so as a consequence, I don't pay full price for a whole lot of anything, which is really quite nice, but it's still ridiculously expensive.
Yeah. Well, choose your method, guys. Do your homework and but is NMN and NR one of those things that you do need to have a good quality one, or can anyone slap that stuff together?
Well, so the good news, NR, only one person makes it, it's Chromadex. So you can get it in any other brand name, but the same people make it. So it doesn't matter. NMN, it's a very good question. I stick to Rev Genetics. I don't know about the cheaper varieties of NMN.
Mm-hmm. Rev Genetics, I take some of their stuff too, and they do have, I don't know, like just everyone does when they have sales, 3 for the price of 2 and all that stuff. This is another way we can sort of get around it.
Right.
So,
and if you buy 50 at a time, they'll give you a permanent half price.
oh, wow. Okay, there we go. But we need a closet. I can't do that as a nomad, but anyone else who's got space, do it. If I had the space, I probably would. I already look like a drug mule when I travel and move because I have so many supplements in my bag. So any last minute questions before we let Dr. Kaufman go?
Yes, I would ask lactoferrin comparing to metformin and berberine. What could you say? Because they
The
are
world of
all,
difference. They just do different things.
they are helping with sugar, right?
Yes. Yes. So they just do different. So metformin and berberine are very similar in what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I have decided I took my dose of metformin, divided it in half, and I take half metformin and half berberine because it seems like the synergy of the two is extremely good.
You take
and
at the
they
same
hit
time.
slightly differently. Well, so I take one in the morning and one at night.
Okay.
So they change your gut microbiota just a little bit differently than each other, but they're both very helpful. They both activate your AMP kinase. They both do a variety of very, very, very similar things. And you decrease the side effects by synergizing them together, right? And it does decrease blood glucose levels. That being said, I am a glucose junkie. So I am always trying to dream up ways of getting rid of glucose from my system. And one of the ways I do this is, there's probably 12 different things that I do, but one of them that's horribly efficacious is lactoferrin, because I think AGEs will ultimately do most of us in. So if you hit the AGE process from many different ways, you're just more likely going to do better. So I do both, obviously.
Okay.
Magdalena, you don't eat sugar. You shouldn't be worried about this stuff. You can save some money.
Wait,
She's
like what we
there
all
is
look
sugar
up to,
everywhere.
No, you don't.
No, I remembered when you said, Dr. Kaufman, for these ages, and comparing, let me say, to have a nice or not nice skin, that it's so important. That was for the first time when I heard, I think for the name glycation and for these ages. And since then, I'm really very careful about it. And I would like to keep my skin looking great further on, and I think that's important because it's sugar. I think it's the most important thing which causes the damage of collagen. And that's why I think we should be thinking about it, not just for a beautiful skin, but we know also because of the inflammation in the body and so on. So this is something
100%.
very important.
100%. And if you can block glucose absorption, you can block gluconeogenesis, you can block a whole lot of things. Going from a glucose to an AGE is like a 7 enzymatic step, and you can actually block each of those steps. And then I have this something, it's sort of silly. I call it the glucose decoy system. There are 3 amino acids that preferentially stick to glucose. So when I do feel like being a little piglet, I'll take the amino acids, hoping that the glucose will bond to that, and then you excrete it, and you're reducing your AGE risk. The other really good thing to get rid of AGEs is chlorogenic acid, and that's in book 2. And it's one of the big things in coffee. It's the more roasted, the less chlorogenic acid. So I tend to eat just the beans. But chlorogenic acid is amazing, and if you're trying to like sort of maximize getting rid of AGEs, that's your go-to. So between that and lactoferrin, you're good to go.
Super, great. Thanks.
So, well, a question then, what I'd say is we do need some glucose, right? We need to have our body function. But if somebody is actually having a really low glucose diet or, very, very low, should they be taking things like this? Or because maybe it's not necessary and they actually could be doing damage by not getting enough glucose? Is that a possibility?
It just depends. For those people that are uber neurotic, then they just have to gauge it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
My goal, and granted, I'm one of the world's biggest biohackers, but I am not willing to not enjoy the things that I like.
Mm-hmm.
So I eat a normal diet, which of course has glucose in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I do 17 things to not worry about my glucose intake.
Mm-hmm.
If someone has a super, super low glucose, then maybe they worry about one or two little aspects of this, but they don't go whole hog. So again, these are just tools to titrate based on who you are and what your goals are.
And how much exercise you do as well, like imagine, because we do need some glucose to fuel the system if you're athletic. So if I were to take, I'm not as low as Magdalena in terms of my glucose intake, but I'm pretty active. So I'm always questioning, should I be doing something like this, or am I doing more damage to myself if I'm already quite low and active and maybe need that glucose? But I'll have to gauge it. It's one of those things. It's hard when you write a book. You are talking to a very wide audience, and are you sedentary? Are you old? Are you young? Are you a man? Are you a woman? What's your diet like? There's so many factors to consider. So I appreciate how difficult it is to even make a recommendation. So, I
hate to do this. I have to be on a meeting right now.
Yeah. Okay. Any last thoughts before we let you go? Anything you'd like to say?
No, I just want to thank all of you ladies. This is an amazing opportunity. I appreciate everyone. And if you have any questions, concerns, or anything, please don't hesitate to contact me. I am always available.
Awesome. I'm going to have all the links in the show notes. Your website is Kaufman Protocol, Kaufmann protocol.com. Your Instagram is Kaufman Anti-Aging. You're on Facebook. I'm going to have links to all the books and your email. You're amazing for answering emails. I love you for this. I'm so happy that you did reply to my email. Otherwise, we wouldn't have you here today. So have a wonderful day, the rest of your day at work. Thank you so much for taking this time, and we will let everybody know when that book is out.
Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.